Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is the lab 8. So in the lab 8, we are going to talk about a different sorts of data handling process, how you can import the data, how you can export the data. And this lab 8 has been divided into three sections. In the first part, you are going to see different sorts of data handling process. In the next part, you will see how you can import different sorts of data or how you can work with different sorts of data. And at the last section, you are going to see an exercise example. Let us just dive into the first part, that is the data handling process. Okay. So what does the data handling means? So it means the how you are going to process the overall the data. So there are some steps that you need to follow. First of all, you have to collect the data from a resource, from a source, from your net or from your sensor or from your hardware setup. You have to first of all collect the data. After collecting the data, you need to store it. So how you are going to store it? Definitely you are going to utilize some storage system like hardware, like hard disk or SSD. So in those SSD or in those your hardware, you are going to store the data in different formats. Like it can be .csv file, it can be .text file, it can be image file as well. Then next step is that after collecting your data, then you will find there will be different sorts of noise. Suppose I am speaking in front of a mic right now at this moment. So if you have or if you heard some sorts of noise, background noise, so that's not a desirable thing, right? So what we want to do, we want to just clear those noises from our actual or from my speech. Okay, then what we have to do, I have to import my speech or my recorded speech into a tool. Then you have to remove or filter out all the background noises. That's one thing. Suppose you have some glitch or you have some error, you have to clear those error. Okay, so that's another process. Then the next step is that the data transformation. So data transformation means you have to do or you have to utilize different sorts of techniques, data manipulation techniques. Okay, so you can provide some normalization technique, some scaling technique, or some encoding technique. Suppose you have a very small data or not relatable data. One data is very large and another data is very small. So in that case, you have to do the feature scaling. Suppose, let me give you a very simple example. Suppose you have a like a house size. This is a simple data where you will give only two different inputs. One will be the house size and the second one will be the rooms, number of rooms. And if you provide these two input sections, then finally it's going to detect what is the price of that house. Okay, so if you're working with the data, then all the inputs they are named as, or input columns they are named as features. Okay, and finally what's the output, that's called the targeted output. Okay, so over here you can see the house size, it's a very high value, and the room number, it's a very small one. So you have to, it's just a single point data. If you have a multiple datas, then you have to do the feature scaling. Okay, so using the feature scaling, the values will be related between 0 to 1 or -1 to 1. Okay, so all the datas will be much more relatable to it. Suppose if you do the scaling over here and it becomes like 0.25 and it's becoming like zero point 0.1, so it's a much more relatable data, okay, rather than the first column. Okay, then there comes the data analysis part. You have prepared your data for your algorithm, for your tools. Now you just have to import the data and do the analysis part. Different sorts of techniques are available. So whether you may use the machine learning techniques or whether you may use the data mining techniques, whatever you are comfortable, you may just use those techniques. Finally, after doing or after making the analysis part, then you have some results. Okay, now to make it visualizable, or to visualize those datas, there is a process. Then you can call different sorts of charts, different sorts of plots, different graphs. Okay, just for the insights or just to reveal the patterns how it looks. Then after whatever the data you have, you just want to save it, then you have to export the data. Okay, so these are the 7 steps that you need to follow for any data handling process. Okay, now here comes the resource part, that for different tasks, which tools or languages you need to use. It's been already given. So just go through them. You don't have to memorize those things. It's just have some idea that which part you have to use for which portion. These things will help you in your little life. Okay, now I want to talk about something important, that is the data types. So there are 3 sorts of data. One is called the structured data, then you have the unstructured data, and lastly is the semi-structured data. Structured data or structured data, it means it has some finite structure. So one thing is that it's organized in a scheme. Okay, like rows and columns. It's a very important parameter, rows and columns, while working with the tables. Okay, while working with the tables, it should have some definite rows and columns. Suppose I'm working in the Excel right now. All right, so here you can see these are the rows, these two, 1 and 2, these are the rows, and these are the columns, A, B, and C. These are the columns. Okay, so this is the tabular format data. So over here you can see the values are being in a structured format. It has some finite values of rows and as well as finite values of columns. Okay, so this is the structured data. It will have some rows and columns, and it will have some pattern. Okay, now unstructured data, there is no definite scheme. Okay, it can be in various dimension. It can be sometimes a single dimension, sometimes 3 dimensions, sometimes it can have only a single row, sometimes it can have multiple rows. So you cannot define it in a single pattern. Okay, so there is no pattern or there is no fixed format. So what are those sorts of data? So it's the most complex sorts of data, or most complex one data. That is, requires a high processing tool, okay, like machine learning or the computer vision or the natural language processing. Okay, so like what are the examples? You have the text data, you have the image data, you have the videos, the audios, these sorts of things. Now, the semi-structured data. Semi-structured data, over here, it's been shown that it doesn't strictly follow a format of a table. Okay, so it means that it doesn't strictly follow. That means for a particular row, you may skip like 1 or 2 column, or you may skip 1 column value. Okay, it may not have a particular 1 column value. Okay, so it doesn't have a strict format. That's one thing. Now here are the examples. That is the JSON file, the XML file, the HTML file, these sorts of things. So while working with these sorts of things, you will see two values. One is called the tags and the second one is called the value. Okay, tags, or it can also be said as a key value pairs. Now let me show you a very simple example of a JSON file. So it's already given in the Google. Just simply search for JSON file example. So here you can see it's a simple JSON file where you have some user ID, then it has some value, then again username, then again it has some value. So before the column, before the colon, before the colon, whatever the value you have, they are called the tags, or it can also be called as keys. Okay, and after the colon, whatever you have, they are called the values, and in total they have been called as key value pairs. Okay, so over here, user ID, username, is active, age, email, hobbies, location, all these things are values. Okay, sorry, keys or tags. And 101, coder dev, true, 28, all these things, they are the values. Okay, so it doesn't follow a strict pattern format. Okay, so that's from the part A. Then we will jump to part B.